So we're here to talk about gender and political participation in Myanmar. I'm here with May Sabe Phyu, who is the director of Gender Equality Network, GEN, based in Yangon. May just gave a fascinating talk about problems of gender, the challenges of gender empowerment and political participation in Myanmar at IDRC, and we're going to follow up on that talk and go more into detail in those questions about gender and politics. Maybe I'll start off by asking May some more personal questions, and then we can go to more macro issues as we move along in this interview. And the first question I'd like to ask you is clearly you've established yourself as established a very well-functioning organization and done a lot of work in Myanmar. And as a woman working in civil society, I wonder if you can tell us how you began to move up the ranks, how you found yourself as a woman developing an organization, being active in civil society. If you can give us a bit of a personal background about your interest and your involvement, and even the challenges you faced as a woman developing this organization.
Okay, so it's like before I work with GEN, so I'm the primary health care workers. So I work with MSF Holland for 8 years, and also I am in charge of community health education project run by United Nations Development Program, and our project is based in all the remote areas of Myanmar. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, during my 8 years working with MSF Holland, you know, like I have a chance to meet with women and girls who are in need of health services. Mm-hmm. And also like, I mean, the malaria, tuberculosis, HIV/AIDS, you know, even the sexually transmitted disease. It's so difficult for women to get access to the health services, you know. Even our organizations have provided free healthcare services in the villages. So I don't know why they have so difficult, you know, like to get access to the health services, because this is free. Mm-hmm. But you know, like I came to understand that women has, I mean, lack of negotiation power, mm-hmm. and also like women have a triple burden, you know, like within the family. So even to go to the free clinic, you know, to get health services, they don't have time. And also like they don't have negotiation power with their in-laws, with their husbands, you know, like why they need these kind of health services. And also like working with the community development projects in remote townships funded by UNDP. So we've been like working in all remote townships area. So I have been in touch with, you know, women and girls from different ethnic communities, you know. And we've been talking about safe motherhood, I mean like immunizations for the children, and also like sexual and reproductive health needs for the woman. And there are so many barriers and challenges, even for the rural women, you know, like I mean nutrition for breastfeeding mothers, for the pregnant women, you know, and also like to get their children to be immunized. I mean, there are so many differences, I mean, different barriers and challenges that women are dealing at the community level. Mm-hmm. And as a UN, I mean, it was in 2015-16 actually. So the UN started to talk about gender. Mm-hmm. And you know, like, I mean, within the UN system, they started to provide gender trainings to the staff. And I saw, you know, like a strong resistance, you know, even among the UN staff, because gender is a new concept for them. And they think that this is just a Western concept. And you know, like there is no gender inequality issues exist in our country. And with our, I mean, lovely culture, traditions, and religious teaching, you know, I mean, they simply think that women enjoy equal rights with men. Mm-hmm. And you know, being I mean, socialized stereotypes, you know, teaching from the religion, from their culture, as well as from the school. they simply internalize, there are no problems exist in their community. So as a woman, of course, I saw, a lot of challenges and barriers that women face in different communities. Though women might live in different ethnic groups, they may have different religions background, but they are problems, and the needs are the same to me as a woman. So in order to help them, I would like to understand more about gender and how can we bring this gender equality agenda into the field of community development, into the field of public health, right? So and also on the other hand, being an ethnic Kachin woman, so I myself have a lot of my own experience on discriminations, at home, at school, at the community. So I mean, living in the patriarchal society, you have to find ways how you will be able to help women and girls to live up, free from discriminations, enjoy equal rights and opportunities, with their male family members. I really want to understand what gender is all about. So I decided to go for study, on gender and development studies in 2009 in Thailand. Then, after I graduated from my master's degree on gender and development studies, so I devoted my life, pursuing for gender equality in Myanmar. Because, back in 2011, after I came back from my study, the gender is still highly sensitive words. And whoever I talk to about gender, they may say that what it is all about, and why you have to talk about gender, in our society. So all these questions, all these responses, make me to, more, how to say, seeing huge needs and gaps, in order to work for promoting women's rights and gender equality in Myanmar.
Great, thank you. That's really very quite a lot of work you've done, and it's very clear how you became interested in gender from your work on health. But just again to the personal issue, and you mentioned that you're a Kachin woman. You faced challenges as a Kachin woman. I wonder if you can tell us specifically on the issues of ethnicity, Kachin, and as a woman, what kind of challenges you faced in Myanmar, and how eventually that, clearly your work in health and your work in gender sort of crystallized from some earlier challenges or ideas you had in the past. But I wonder if you can run us through what kind of challenges you face and how you saw those as crucial to your career trajectory.
So it's like not only Kachin, not only within the Kachin communities, but also in many ethnic communities, women are not allowed to involve in the public life. So for example, we have very well-known proverbs that, only when, how to say, when hens crow, there will not be dawn. So it's and also in our Kachin proverbs, if women talk, they will create more problems.
Right.
And only when men talks, it will benefit for the family. There are several teachings or proverbs, in many different ethnic communities, that women are not supposed to participate in the community meeting. Women are not supposed to talk. And women's role and women's place is at home. And women's responsibility is to take care of their children and their family. That's all, right? So of course, my personal life, when I pass matriculation, like I would like to learn English and computer, like my friends. But my father told me that being a woman, you have to get married one day, and you have to do, cooking and household work. So you have to learn how to cook at home. You have to learn how to be a good housewife, instead of learning English and computer. So, these are, not only me, these are very common life experience of many women living in Myanmar. So it's like, and also being a woman leading an organization, or seeing a woman as a leader, of course, there will be a lot of questions about who she is, what kind of background she has, what kind of family she's from. Because, like whenever seeing women in a leadership position, unless you are from a well-known political background family, you are not supposed to be there. So these are the common understanding or common perceptions of, okay, women can be leader only, if she's, if her father is a national hero, or if her husband is, well-known politician, right? So as an ordinary woman, you are not supposed to lead, because, as the proverbs say, if women talk a lot, it will bring a lot of problems for the community. So that's how the community are perceived, women's leadership in the public life.
Right. So you're clearly indicating that there are traditional customs, values, sayings that can constrain women, and also the patriarchal structures, and your own father's sort of ideas are sort of problematic in terms of women's ability to study subjects that allow them to empower themselves. But specifically, again, your personal life, given these constraints you faced in terms of the nature of the customs and your father's own comments, then how did you yourself move away from that, find your own direction? Did certain individuals or institutions help you as you moved up your career trajectory? How did you move up given these constraints?
Yeah. So in my own opinion, so the education is a key. So it's like, my own life is a clear example. So I got married in my very early age. After I finished my first year in the university, and even after I have 3 children, I was not able to complete my bachelor degree. So as I am, having children, getting married, not finishing education, my place is just in the kitchen or in the household. My core responsibility is my children and to take care of my in-laws. But I decided to continue my study. Even after 10 years, I stopped. So, and of course, there were a lot of challenges, because a lot of questions of why you would like to continue your study. You are a mother already. You have the full responsibility to take care of your own family and your children, and continuing study. What you are going to do? So these are the common challenges or questions we have to overcome. But in this point, what I really would like to highlight is how your man, the role of the husband or the role of man in the family is so important, to allow women to pursue, higher education, or women's participation in the public life or leadership position, So, though the family members, ask a lot of questions, but my husband, encouraged me to continue. And, and I could finish my bachelor degree, and, I decided to continue my master degree. And, after I have higher education, and after I have a job, and when I could earn my own income, I have gained a lot of like agency, right? So to decide things for myself, to decide, I mean, what would be better for my children, you know, how could I contribute to my own community? So I think, you know, like once women have, I mean, good education as well as the income opportunities, you know, you have a lot of, I mean, courage to negotiate with your own family members. And I mean, the role of our men in the family is very, very crucial, you know, because like without their support, I mean, it's so difficult, you know, like for a woman to fight alone, you know, for their own rights. So I mean, like, I mean, that's what I, you know, could testify with my own life story.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, you've clearly pinpointed education as central, the role of men in supporting women and seeing the importance of gender equality, but specifically on education and your understanding that education is important for your own agency, for your own career trajectory. Did your mother or other individuals in your family also inculcate that in you or stress that, or is that something you came to realize by yourself? How did you realize that that is one way that agency can be developed?
Yes, yes. So I have two examples within my family. So one is my grandmother and one is my own mother. So my own mother is, I mean, ordinary housewife. She stay at home, and you know, like she's just like the other majority of women living in country. You know? But when we get older, my mother's always complained, you know, because like her life, she didn't satisfy her life. She thought that, you know, like she has sacrificed her life, you know, to take care of us. And because of, you know, like she stopped her career, I mean, she stopped working, you know, and only taking care of our children and staying at home, she has no learning opportunities, and you know, she has no community that she could, I mean, get involved. So I learned from my mother that if I don't want to be like her, I have to do something different. But looking at my grandmother, so she's still alive, and you know, my grandmother is a very first Kachin woman scholar, able to go to U.S. With the Fulbright scholarships. So she used to be the principal of International School Yangon. So she's, I mean, really, you know, knowledgeable, and she's so good in English, and she's helping, you know, like her own church as well as the community. So, I mean, I've been so inspired or admire, you know, like how my aunties, my uncles, you know, treated with full of respect to my grandmother. And I think that, you know, like, okay, being a mother, actually, you know, you can do a lot better than, you know, like just being cooking at home or taking care of, you know, like your children. You know, you can be educated, and you know, like your children are still loving you with full of respect and inspiration. You know, so I think, you know, my grandmother is my role model and my inspiration. You know, and that's how I learn, you know, why education is so important. And you know, like being an educated woman, you know, you can raise your own family for better condition, as well as you can contribute for your society, you know, at the same time.
That's great. Yeah. So clearly, your grandmother was a very important role model for you, and that's fascinating. Yeah, so just fascinating about the role that your grandmother played in your development, and in fact, you're very fortunate to have a grandmother of that caliber. But I wonder, other women who may not be as fortunate to have in their family or in their extended family women who were already educated, who understood the value of education. So ordinary women who you know, in villages or towns and cities, who may not have that background, what might you, and so now let's talk about more larger sort of programmatic or policy issues. What might you see as, if you were to name a few priorities that your organization, GEN, wants to address, what would you see as priorities to help address problems of educational empowerment, problems of health, of agency? What would you focus on as key issues to address these problems?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of our focus is, like we have to promote more women's role models, because it's like one of the problems we have in our country is, though women are educated, but they ended their life in the family. So, I mean, they have to see that, like there are so many women's leaders out there, doing good for their community. And, like they can be a mother, they can be a housewife, but they can be also like good contributor for the society, right? So one of the things is we try to promote women's role models, that exist in different communities. And another thing is, like we have to come up with evidence and data, having more educated women, and also like allow women to have better agency and negotiation power, not only in their family but also in their community, how it could contribute to the nation's economic development, right, and peace and stability. So we have to collect more and more evidence, more data and information, comparing with the international examples that, like our women can be also, doing the same, right? So this is the second things we are trying to do. So we do more research, right? And also we come up with, our data and informations that, how women are concretely contributing to the nation's building or our peace and development of the country. And the second thing is, changing, society attitudes and perceptions on women's leadership. So, we have done a lot of research and published the report, and we have to change these views, the whole understanding of leadership is only belongs to men, right? So, like we use different innovative way of media, public campaigns, so that women could bring different types of leaderships that the community could not find in men. So one is we promote more women's role models. The second thing is we do more research and publications, and comparing with the international examples. And the third is we try, to change people's attitude and mindsets or perceptions on women's leaderships. So these are some of the things we are trying to focus on. And whenever we talk about women's leadership, the first thing is, capacity, right? Actually, it's not because of women's don't have capacity, because they never have a chance to be a leader. So we have to change, the entire message of, questions on capacity to be a leader as well.
Yeah, that's great, and that absolutely makes sense. On the issue of role models, someone inspiring that can motivate women in general, can you give me some examples in the political system at any level of government, or if you give me a few examples of different levels of government, beyond, of course, someone like Aung San Suu Kyi, but in a more sort of mundane political level. Can you give us examples of role models that women can aspire to, can see as future, as something that they can look up to in the public political realm?
Sure. So to be able to promote women's role models, actually Jen have published the Transformative Women's Leaders in Myanmar. It's a book. So in the first book, we have selected 20 women's leaders from different backgrounds. And the second series will coming out soon. So it's like we try to highlight that, actually, not only Aung San Suu Kyi, there are a lot of women's leaders in the community. They are leading up different issues, and they are, how to say, contributing, the best for the community. So we have interviewed, so the woman police officer, like how her life experience to become a police officer, because Myanmar police forces, the majorities are men. And also we have interviewed the how to call a woman physician, and also we interview women's prime minister in the current state. So we interviewed the chair of the Yangon Municipal Committee, who is a woman. So we try to highlight that. Amazing women are out there. And when you are talking about leadership is not related to women, but actually in the community they are doing a lot of good things and they are showing their leadership, right? So, and this is one of the visible example of promoting role models. And also we are now planning to have a regular TV programs on champions of gender equality. So not only just pictures and book or articles, we are also trying to capturing the actual activities of women's leaders in the community, how they are contributing to their community. So the programs will highlight, some of the challenges to be a leader of their organizations or the leader of their own community, right? And then how they have overcome all these challenges, and how much they have done, and what are their inspirations, so that the people could understand more on different challenges women have, and also how can they be supporter of those women's leaders. So these are some of the examples that we are trying to do on promoting women's role models.
Great, great. Let me take the conversation to more comparative questions now. And I'll refer to the presentation, the wonderful presentation you gave at IDRC just about an hour ago, where you had shown some slides where Myanmar, in terms of political participation of women, ranked below other countries in Southeast Asia, or globally, but let's just speak about Southeast Asia. And what struck me was that it ranked even below a country like Laos, that is, very low GDP per capita, comparable to Myanmar. And so the first question I'd like to ask comparatively is, why do you think, say, Myanmar, Laos, that have similar GDP per capita, both very poor countries, why do you think Myanmar still would rank much lower than a country like Laos? Do you think there are any distinct aspects of the society and politics in Myanmar that have affected the capacity, the trajectories of women in political participation compared to other Southeast Asian countries, and especially compared to countries in Southeast Asia that are a similar economic level with Myanmar?
Well, I could say that, our country's been living under the military dictatorships, for more than 5 decades. This is very, a strong fact, why women participation in politics is so low. Because, in the past 50 to 60 years, all the political leadership is men from the military, right? And also, even we have free and fair elections after 2010, but military still are, get 25% seats in the parliament. So when women's groups are talking about 30% quota, for the women in the parliament, but the militaries seize 25% of our seats in the parliament. So I think that's the very obvious reasons, if you compare with the other ASEAN countries, because no other countries living under military dictatorship so long like us.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, they're all the military, and being very all heavily male would clearly have an impact. That's true. Keeping the discussion again comparative perspective, but now I want to go in terms of comparisons within Myanmar, and again, in referring to the presentation you gave, you had shown that in different states or regions in Myanmar there is quite a bit of variation in terms of, again, women's political participation in state state representatives. And I wonder if you could give us some hypotheses as to why you think different regions or states would have quite sharp variation in terms of women's political participation.
Yes. So it's like, when we look at women's representations in states and regions, so, obviously in the states, so the ethnic states who practice the patriarchal system, like Kaya, Kachin, Chin, so, lower women's representations are in the parliament. But if we look at Karen or Mon, so are known as matrimonial society, and also having, women's role models in the history, so they have more women's representations in the parliament, interestingly, so it's not just our observation. Actually, Jan had done the research on social practices and cultural norms, across the countries, across the ethnic groups and religion, and it's clearly show that, when the community practice, matrimonial system, and also having, more women's role models at the leadership position. So that the society have positive attitude and perceptions towards women's leadership, because Mon have a famous queen in their history, and also the Karen. So the current ethnics are the current Karen ethnic arms leaders are, one of them are women. So that is why promoting women's role model as a leader in the community is so important, and it could produce positive results in terms of women participation in decision making and leadership.
Right. Yeah. So cultural patterns, as well as role models historically, these things help explain variation within Myanmar. But what about, excuse me, any institutional factors? Do you think institutional factors, I don't know, constitutional structures or other rules or I don't know, organizations, do you think these also matter in explaining patterns of gender political participation?
Yes, so as an institutional factor, so our country still practices the, the electoral system, right? And also the political parties or Union Election Commission, so they don't understand much gender, how they could, how they could use gender mainstreaming in their political parties' policy, as well as a strategy for the Union Elections Commission. So right now we've been working closely with the political parties, and how could they develop their own gender policy within their political parties. And the Union Election Commissions, they have just finished developing the gender strategy for the Union Election Commission. So unless the political parties or the union level election commissions, they understand how can they provide support to the women's candidates, or how can they make institutional, like mechanisms to make sure that more women are able to, like run for the elections. I mean, these are some of the area we still need to improve. And also, like the changing the electoral system. I mean, it will be a big debate, right? So there are a lot of like debating on our PR system, for example. So I mean, unless we are able to see, how different electoral systems could make sure, like equal representation and participations of not only women but also the minorities, ethnic and religious groups, in order to run for the election. So we still need to, discuss a lot about the institutional factor.
Right, right. And what about within civil society, besides GEN, do you find that there is a robust network of civil society organizations that are addressing issues of gender from different perspectives? Is there a healthy, vibrant movement within civil society in Myanmar on this issue?
Well, that's a good question. So it's like GEN is one of the biggest network, working for promoting women's rights and gender equality in Myanmar. But we have the other sisters network and organizations, so such as Women's League of Burma, Women's Organizations Network, Alliance for Gender Inclusion and Peace Process. We all are working for the same directions of promoting women participation in leadership, politics, as well as the peace process. So, apart from women's groups and network, we still need to encourage the wider civil society, to understand that why women participation and and gender equality is so important, for their work as well. So instead of we working with the focal ministries, now we are also trying to approach, interministerials, as well as, looking for more partners, who believe in gender equality, so that, we can walk hand in hand, and then this gender mainstreaming agenda could be strengthened, widely.
Good. And in terms of, say, transnational, international actors, has GEN worked with, or does GEN see international organizations or transnational actors as also crucial to the process of better gender equality?
Of course, yeah. So it's there are a lot of international organizations and transnational organizations who are really champions for gender equality. So, we are civil society organizations and network, and, by nature, our own government or our own policymakers, they don't care so much of what we said. But when we are, collaborating and, working with the international organizations and the transnational organizations, it's provides a lot of, credibility, as well as, legitimacy, for the governments to listen, what the women civil society wants them to do in country. So there are a lot of organizations we work closely with, and and also we are very happy, the international governments like Canada, Norway, Sweden, Switzerland, US, UK. So they are, and many others, So if I forgot to mention, it's not limited to only them. But I mean, in country as well, so the international governments and the development partners, so they have formed like a gender equality and women's empowerment sectorial working groups. It's a coordination groups of, you know, like all the international governments, UN agencies, donors, and the civil society. You know, how can we work together, you know, to push forward gender equality agenda in Myanmar? So, I mean, like, we are not working alone. So we work together with all these, you know, like stakeholders, and trying to bring both international instruments as well as strengthening the national mechanisms, you know, already in place within the country.
Great. I'll ask you just one last question to end this interview. And I guess what I'd like to ask you as a final message is, if you were to pick one thing, one idea, or one priority in terms of gender equality and gender and political participation in Myanmar, or even more generally, what would you want to, for those watching this podcast, what would you want to emphasize as say a fundamental bottom line or as a fundamental idea?
So, the key indicator to measure gender equality in one country, you know, number of women participations in leadership and decision making is the I mean, the top. So, and also like I mean, as an individual, women's rights activist, or leading network promoting for women's rights and gender equality, we strongly believe that unless women could make policies for their lives and their children, you know, we cannot call this is a gender equal society. So that is why, you know, like we invest so much, you know, our efforts and resources, you know, to promote more women participation in leadership and decision making. You know, women has to decide for their own body. Women has to decide, you know, like what kind of policy will shape for their own life as well as for their families. Otherwise, you know, like I mean, yeah, there will be no gender equal society, you know, we can call for it.
Right. So women's role in policy and more generally decision-making processes. Great. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed this very much talking with you.
Thank you so much.